Hello, my name is Barry O'Carroll and I'm the Assistant Coordinator of Europe Direct Blanchardstown Library. For the last 16 months, EU citizens have for the most part been unable to enjoy the benefits of freedom of movement within the EU. The COVID-19 pandemic has meant that few citizens could travel to another EU country for holidays, work or to visit family. The EU Digital COVID Certificate aims to facilitate the return of travel between EU countries and to make arriving and departing as frictionless as possible. I spoke to the head of the European Commission representation in Ireland, Barbara Nolan, to learn more about the certificate. Welcome, Barbara, and thank you very much for taking the time to speak to me today.
I'm delighted to be able to join you, Barry. It's an important issue we're going to discuss, the digital COVID certificate.
Yeah, absolutely. I think everyone at this stage, including myself, is eager to maybe start travelling again. I know, again, in my family, we have people living in another EU country, the Netherlands. They're eager to get back to visit family. I know there's lots of tourists who want to see Ireland again. And I know that the EU Digital COVID Certificate is perhaps a way that this process will be made a little bit easier. So, I mean, to begin with, I just want to ask you, what exactly is the EU Digital COVID Certificate?
Well, I mean, first of all, we have to remember we've been through a situation over the past year and a half where people's right to move freely around the EU has been heavily impacted by the pandemic. We shouldn't forget that free movement is a fundamental freedom of being a member of the EU, and it's a very treasured freedom, I think, by many people. But of course, because of public health considerations, this has been, as I said, heavily impacted upon by the pandemic. So the idea of creating a sort of a COVID digital certificate was to try to facilitate free movement. It's not a passport, but it is supposed to be a certificate that gives your COVID status, if you like. And thereby, because it's going to be interoperable between the EU member states, it is like a kind of a guarantee of your status and thereby facilitating free movement. So this was the idea behind the Commission proposal to create this, because we could see all the patchwork quilt of restrictions around the European Union, which were preventing people, even people who had been fully vaccinated, from moving freely and exercising this fundamental freedom of movement.
Well, as you say, you just said now, it is one of the fundamental foundations of the EU is freedom of movement. So it's only right that we want to kind of get that happening again. And you've already covered, I suppose, why the certificate was created. And when exactly is that due to come into effect in Ireland?
Well, in Ireland has signalled that it would be able to introduce the certificate into operation on the 19th of July. But for most other member states, it will be the 1st of July as the target date. And indeed, some member states, I think around 17 now, are already using the certificate because, for example, countries that rely heavily on tourism, they wanted it to be in use as soon as possible because, of course, they have suffered already kind of the one season being completely a complete disaster, and they wanted to get it in operation as soon as possible. So, different countries have different objectives in terms of introducing it, but for us, the bulk, I think, will be ready for the 1st of July. And then we have a 6-week sort of grace period for other countries to join. And Ireland, as I said, 19th of July is supposed to be the target date for Ireland.
Okay, so the 19th of July. And I've been told that there are different types of certificates. Could you tell me a little bit more about that?
Yes, I mean, there's 3 different types. I mean, they will all look probably relatively the same, but I mean, there's one that will attest if you are vaccinated already for COVID-19. The second one will show that you have have had a negative test result. So that's for the unvaccinated. And then the third one is for people who have recovered from COVID. So that will give information about that. So they're the three categories which will cover most people. You're either vaccinated, you're not vaccinated, or you've recovered. So these are the three types, but of course they will all have probably a very similar look, with some basic information about you, your name, when, for example, you got your vaccines, if it's the vaccination one, when you were tested, if it's the one for those people who aren't already vaccinated. We have tried to keep the information to a minimum for data protection reasons, because this is not a passport. This is an accompanying document, certificate, to facilitate your free movement. And it's very important people realize that it's not something that can be used as a passport. That's not the purpose of it. It is a certificate to attest to your status with regard to the COVID situation. So that's why, but they will look very similar, and they will all have a QR code, because we need a single identifier to make sure that the information is safe, etc., and correct and accurate. So that's the way it's been planned. And you can download it on your phone, but there will also be a possibility of a paper version as well. And very importantly, free of charge.
That is a question I was going to ask, and I know that's one people have been asking me already. And could I just follow up there on something you said? Are all vaccinations, whether they be the Pfizer, AstraZeneca, Moderna, are they all treated the same in terms of the certificate?
Yes, they are. I mean, any of the vaccines that have been approved by the European Medicines Agency are interchangeable, if you like, or acceptable for this purpose. If it's not approved by the European medicines agencies, and there are some vaccines out there, mainly not very common in Europe, but in other jurisdictions, they are not. If they're not approved, they are not valid for this purpose. I mean, this is an intra-EU primarily certificate, and therefore, we trust the European Medicines Agency on, the safety of those vaccines.
Thank you. And I think what's interesting there as well is that if you're not yet vaccinated, it doesn't mean you cannot travel. And I think a lot of people were a little bit anxious about that, especially we've spoken to students who are studying in various EU universities. So that's very interesting to hear. So just to move on now, does the EU digital COVID certificate guarantee frictionless travel without quarantines or other restrictions in EU countries? Or is there still a possibility that there could be restrictions?
Well, in principle, it does. However, I mean, take, for example, what we're seeing today, which is this rise of the Delta variant. There could be a situation where a country feels that they need to put some kind of an emergency brake on all of this, or, if it gets out of control. So, I mean, in principle, it's supposed to mean that you're good to go, basically. But of course, you cannot exclude some public health reason for taking emergency measures. Now, I would have to say we have been at pains to say that, we don't want to see countries adding conditions to this, because it kind of negates the whole point of having this certificate. So, the gold plating, as we call it, where, there's restrictions added on top. That is not supposed to happen in this particular case. We are supposed to have the certificate interchangeable and treated the same across the EU. But obviously, I have to make that caveat about if there is some kind of public health, emergency, where obviously we can't exclude that a member state might introduce some other, restriction or limitation to free movement.
Okay, so an individual EU country could, in theory, set its own restrictions depending on the circumstances.
Indeed, but we would very much hope that, we can get this going. And I mean, it is going. I should say it is going, as I said. Some countries have rushed to do it as soon as possible, as soon as it became available. Many countries have been involved in the testing phase. The Commission operates the basic platform, if you like, for it, and then the member states build their own their own element for the national rollout of this particular certificate. So, we are really looking forward to this up and running, fully up and running as soon as possible.
So, there's no doubt it's going to make travel a lot easier, but people should probably just do a little bit of research before leaving to make sure the country they intend to go to or travel through doesn't have additional restrictions. Yeah, just to be safe.
Normal precautions, but in principle, as I said, it should, it is supposed to be your guarantee of your status vis-a-vis COVID and fully recognised across the EU from the 1st of July.
Excellent. And to move on from there, you mentioned earlier that this is an intra-EU certificate. So can I take that as given that the digital COVID certificate won't be accepted for travel to non-EU countries, such as the UK or the USA? Is it recognised there, or are there any discussions about that?
Yeah, indeed, look, there are obviously other what we call third countries because they're outside of the EU. And they are, we are in touch, for example, with the US. We already know that some other European countries that we have close relationships with, but that are not in the EU, like, say, for example, Norway, Switzerland, they are linking in with our COVID certificate. We have made overtures to the US to offer the possibility of them being able to come to the EU, and we are hoping for reciprocity from them. So the idea would be that we try to build up a kind of a mutual recognition, if you like, of each other's certificates. I'm sure the UK will be part of that, but Irish people anyway don't have much of an issue because of the common travel area with the UK in terms of going back and forth to the UK. So, but the idea is, of course, we are hoping we've set the standard now. We will have 27 member states applying this across the EU. So we're hoping that others will be able to make some kind of efforts to be interoperable with us. And obviously mutual recognition would be, if we're offering it to somebody, we expected them to offer it back in return to EU nationals.
Okay, thank you. So that's something that might become clearer in the coming weeks, I imagine.
Yes, our priority first and foremost, as you can imagine, Barry, is to get the free movement between EU member states. But of course, we recognise that there are many other places people want to go to, which are outside the EU. But our first efforts obviously have to go in terms of making our own operation work in the European Union.
Okay, and we've spoken, I suppose, a lot about in terms of Irish people wishing to travel to EU countries, whether it be for business or holidays or visiting family. I've had some questions from Irish people, including my own family, who are living in another EU country themselves and are very eager to get home. We often haven't seen them in almost 2 years now. So I'll give the example of the Netherlands, where my own sister lives. She's hoping to come back now in August. So if all works well, on presentation of her certificate at the Dutch airport, that should work equally well in Dublin airport, and the same for her return. Is that right?
Correct. As I said, Ireland is, one of the later countries joining. But from the 19th of July, in principle, she should be able to present her Dutch certificate and pass through the airport in the normal way, and likewise for her return to the Netherlands. Let's see. You look at the news like me, I'm sure, Barry, and you've seen that this Delta variant is introducing some more uncertainty, which just at the moment when everybody's packing their bags. So, we're all in a similar situation waiting to see what happens. But hopefully, the vaccine rollout is going so well in Ireland that the more and more people that are vaccinated, the more they're protected from this new variant, obviously.
Absolutely. And we recently did an event where we spoke about the vaccine rollout in Ireland. And since then, the progress that's been made has been absolutely tremendous. We made this event right at the beginning. And since then, I think we're over almost 35% fully vaccinated, over 60% with one shot, including myself the other day. So I just want to finish by saying thank you to you, Barbara. That was very informative, and I think we're all really looking forward to, in the next few months, to seeing some semblance of normality returning, and that cherished free movement returning as well.
Absolutely, and I'm looking forward myself. So I haven't been able to go back to Brussels for meetings or anything at the moment, but I'm hoping we will all be in a new reality and back to normal. I mean, let's remember, we have a fundamental right. We have to be able to exercise that right, and that's the whole point of these EU digital COVID certificates. So I hope it doesn't crash with us all logging on the 19th of July. But anyway, we look forward to that.
Thank you very much for that, Barbara.
Thank you, Barry. Thank you. Bye-bye.